came across this video from the Facebook page BRUT. If you don't know who BRUT is, BRUT are basically the little brothers to Buzzfeed. They're basically Buzzfeed lite. They're trying really hard to be Buzzfeed. Anyway, this video is titled, Meet Alt-Right Hero Jordan Peterson. Do you think they're going to try and be impartial about who Jordan Peterson is? No. They're already off to a horrid start. Alt-Right hero Jordan Peterson. Because, of course, the alt-right are horrible, and anyone they consider a hero must also be horrible. Guilt by association, right? But the main reason why I wanted to show this to you is because this is one of the most cherry-picked videos I have ever seen to try and push an agenda. Let's get into how BRUT has dishonestly shown who Jordan Peterson is.
To say what we have to say badly, or we won't be able to think at all.
So already you can see that BRUT is trying to paint Jordan Peterson as a horrible person simply by associating him with the alt-right. Now there's a simple thing to point out here. You can't pick your followers. He can't help that the alt-right follows him. But that doesn't make him alt-right, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the things he's saying are horrible.
The more you scream for equality, the more your unconscious is going to admire dominance.
No, Peterson does not believe in equality of outcome for the sexes, and nor should anybody else. In fact, let's let Jordan Peterson himself elaborate on it. And a lot of you have probably seen this clip, but this comes from the interview he did with Newman on Channel 4 in Britain.
Is gender equality a myth?
I don't know what you mean by the question. Men and women aren't the same, and they won't be the same. That doesn't mean they can't be treated fairly.
Is gender equality desirable?
If it means equality of outcome, then almost certainly it's undesirable. That's already been demonstrated in Scandinavia. Because in Scandinavia...
What do you mean by that? Equality of outcome is undesirable?
Well, men and women won't sort themselves into the same categories if you leave them alone to do it of their own accord. We've already seen that in Scandinavia. It's 20 to 1 female nurses to male, something like that. It might not be quite that extreme, and approximately the same male engineers to female engineers. And that's a consequence of the free choice of men and women in the societies that have gone farther than any other societies to make gender equality the purpose of the law. Those are ineradicable differences. You can eradicate them with tremendous social pressure and tyranny, but if you leave men and women to make their own choices, you will not get equal outcomes.
Right.
A short way of summarizing this would be to say that equality of outcome means taking away people's freedoms. Because fundamentally, it involves taking away people's choices and forcing them to do stuff that they're simply not interested in. Like Peterson said, there's way more women in nursing and there's way more men in engineering, simply because they chose to do those jobs. They want to do those jobs. Equality of outcome requires dominance. This is what Jordan Peterson means when he says the more you scream for equality, the more your unconscious is going to admire dominance. So BRUT's not wrong when they say that Jordan Peterson is against equality of outcome, but to the layman they just read that statement as Jordan Peterson is not for equality. But then when you break it down, he's for equality, just not equality of outcome.
Yeah, I think the idea of white privilege is absolutely reprehensible. And it's not because white people aren't privileged, but the idea that you can target an ethnic group with a collective crime, regardless of the specific innocence or guilt of the constituent elements of that group, there is absolutely nothing that's more racist than that. It's absolutely abhorrent.
Jordan Peterson finds the idea of white privilege abhorrent, and so do I. I'm not sure what BRUT is really trying to prove with this point. So Jordan Peterson is against racism. In this case, he's against racism towards white people. So what is BRUT trying to say? That it's okay to be racist to white people? And if you're against it, that somehow makes you alt-right? I would wager that most people are against racism towards anybody. It just seems like in the current age, racism towards white people is not only tolerated but celebrated in some instances. Did you see that jump cut in the middle there? Let's see if we can find the full version of that video.
Yeah, well, I think the idea of white privilege is absolutely reprehensible. And it's not because white people aren't privileged. You know, we have all sorts of privileges, and most people have privileges of all sorts, and you should be grateful for your privileges and work to deserve them, I would say.
Oh, what's this now? Everyone has privileges, not just white people. I can see why BRUT wanted to cut that out.
But the idea that you can target an ethnic group with a collective crime, regardless of the specific innocence or guilt of the constituent elements of that group, there is absolutely nothing that's more racist than that. It's absolutely abhorrent. I can't... Yeah.
This is what I mean about BRUT being extremely dishonest in their portrayal of Peterson. They cut out this entire clip where he explains his point of view on it. All they did was cut together a bit here, a bit there, so they can go, look, here's who he is, without showing you the full explanation.
I mean, if you really want to know more about that sort of thing, you should read about the kulaks in the Soviet Union in the 1920s, Kulaks, because they were farmers who were very productive. They were the most productive element of the agricultural strata in Russia. And they were virtually all killed or raped and robbed by the collectivists who insisted that because they showed signs of wealth, they were criminals and robbers. So, and one of the consequences of the prosecution of the kulaks was the death of 6 million Ukrainians from a famine in the 1930s. The idea of collectively held guilt at the level of the individual as a legal or philosophical principle is dangerous. It's precisely the sort of danger that people who are really looking for trouble would push. So, and just a cursory glance at 20th century history should teach anyone who wants to know exactly how unacceptable that is.
And here is where he's touching on why collectivism is bad. Not just in terms of white privilege, but collectivism in general. That you can punish an entire group of people, made up of individuals, by the way. You can punish an entire group of individuals for crimes they didn't commit simply because you believe that whole group is responsible.
That's terminology generated by the postmodern neo-Marxists. Oh, well, I think those people are reprehensibly murderous. So guess what? I'm not going to say their words, period.
I don't even think I need additional information to debunk this one. Why would you want to do what neo-Marxists want to do? Let's go find the original clip and see what Peterson had to say. I'd also like to point out that throughout all these clips, there isn't any source info in the top right like there normally is in BRUT videos. And I'm wondering if this is intentional or not.
Be all about this very toxic tribal ideology, and this is one of the reasons why so many of these attacks on you are so baffling to me, is because there's a willful ignorance or a deceptive narrative. There's a deceptive description of who you are and what you're saying and what you represent. And it's this conveniently categorized, not even convenient, willfully deceptively categorized into these categories of homophobia, transphobia, sexism. These are reprehensible categories that if they can just shove something that you're saying, figure out a way to push you into this little narrow confine, then everyone has to disagree with you. Everyone has to insult you.
So I just thought I'd include this bit of Joe Rogan talking about the attacks on Peterson, just to show you I'm not the only one who thinks this.
Now, this is really what I can't stand about identity politics, and I've been warning about the consequences of it on the right wing too, because what I see happening is that as the left, like let's say the left gets to define the linguistic territory, which was what I was objecting to in Bill C-16. When it came out, I said, look, I'm not going to use these neologisms, Z and Zer, etc., because as far as I'm concerned, they have nothing
people who don't know what you were talking about. There's a bunch of different made-up gender pronouns to describe people in a non-male or female way.
That's right. So there's like 70 different categories of non-binary gender, something like that, generated now. And there's lists of pronouns that hypothetically the people who are in those categories can choose to be addressed by
and now that has the force of law. And so, and I don't care if they choose to be addressed by those pronouns, whatever. That's up to them and whoever else they can convince or ask or entreat or negotiate with. Fine. As soon as it's law, that's a whole different story. Okay, so now I have to use a certain terminology. So then I look at the derivation of the terminology. I say, oh, that's terminology generated by the postmodern neo-Marxists. Oh, well, I think those people are reprehensibly murderous. So guess what? I'm not going to say their words, period, because I know what they're like. I know where that leads.
So you can see from what Jordan Peterson's saying, he's not against using trans pronouns. He's against the ideology behind somebody who would make it law to force you to use them, or to use any of the other number of non-binary genders. He's not against trans people. He's not against using trans pronouns. He's against the neo-Marxist ideologues that are behind it. BRUT has simply just lied on this one.
There's a social justice warrior type who will be bleeding compassion all over you every step of the discussion.
I was not going to cede the linguistic territory to radical leftists. The humanities are nearest to the foundation of our culture, and they're completely dominated by radical leftists.
Now, the video that this clip came from is a very good one because Peterson actually explains how the stuff that he talks about has driven people away from the alt-right. Let's take a look.
Me, to a degree, is, and maybe it shouldn't concern me, but I'll express this anyway. There's such value in what you've been sharing. For the reasons we just discussed just a second ago. But because of the context in which this arose recently, some of your ideas have been taken up by people on the right who may suffer from exactly the same kinds of ideological possession issues that you argue some people on the extreme left suffer from. And the degree to which what you have been arguing or putting forth or sharing with people becomes conflated with the ideologically possessed arguments on the right or the alt-right is deeply concerning for someone who thinks that who feels and knows that what you have to say is so incredibly valuable, because they'll just.
I've had many people write me from the right or from the fringes of the radical right saying precisely that listening to my lecture stopped them from going all the way. So I would say that if people listen to what I'm saying, then that isn't going to happen. Now, has my message been co-opted? I would say to a much lesser degree than people think. All you have to do is go read the YouTube comments. And there's thousands and thousands of them. And I mean, YouTube comments, it's like most of them are, generated by denizens from the pits of hell. They're really dismissive, aggressive, rude, vulgar, thoughtless, provocative, prejudicial. I mean, you name it, man.
So if we take Mr. Peterson at his word, and I'm inclined to, he says that he's getting letters all the time from people on the fringes of the right saying that they watched his material and it stopped them from going all the way. So how is it that he's the hero of the alt-right, but he continually drags people away from them? He can't be both.
Has to be someone that you can have a conversation with, but a lot of that will just involve listening. It's like we have to extend our hands across the gap because otherwise we'll polarize. That's what's happening. You saw it in Berkeley last week. And that could be just the beginning. And there's lots of people who would like that. That's not a good idea. It's a very bad idea. And I would say it's still my estimation that at the moment, it's the radicals on the left that are primarily responsible for this. And they're primarily responsible particularly because of their stance on free speech. Like, I can't go to Linfield College now. And some arbitrary administrator used a specious excuse to say, no, well, he can't come, even though I was invited. I was already invited. I'd already paid for the airfare. It's like they feel that there is a large coterie of people who feel that it's in their bailiwick to determine who can speak. And that's a very bad idea.
I agree with Mr. Peterson entirely. When he brings up the example of Berkeley, the entire campus nearly went into a full-scale riot simply because some students couldn't handle somebody with an opposing point of view speaking, that it was somehow in some way going to harm them. And that's one of the examples of what he means by they have an issue with free speech, is they want to be able to tell people who can and can't say things, what they can and can't say, when they can say stuff, and when they can't say stuff, and where they can say it and where they can't say it.
So to clarify for people, because I think the way you're describing this inherently speaks to people at the moment, and again, I hesitate to buy into this bifurcation, but people who identify at the moment with the right.
Yeah, well, put it this way. The campuses have not been infiltrated by right-wing radicals. Not at all. Right. Not in the least.
The campuses.
Yeah. Well, the problem with that is that's where the campuses, the humanities, let's lay it out again. Theology at the bottom, philosophy after that. Well, that's where the humanities are. The humanities are nearest to the foundation of our culture. And they're completely dominated by radical leftists, postmodern neo-Marxists. It's not, and that's not my opinion. That's well documented. Right. There aren't even conservatives in those domains, let alone right-wingers. There's not even any conservatives. I mean, maybe you can call conservatives right-wing. I think you're pushing your luck when you do that.
To elaborate on what Peterson just said about the conservatives, there's a growing number of campuses, particularly within the US, that don't even have conservative groups on campus. So many campuses have social clubs, and many of them are based around politics or shared interests. In a growing number of these campuses, there's no conservative political groups, simply because they basically get bullied out of the university should they start one or belong to one.
But there's no conservatives even. So the centrists are on the right as far as the people in the humanities are concerned. Well, that's not good.
Don't you know, Jordan? Anybody right of the far left is a Nazi.
And it's seriously not good, because the humanities have way more effect on our culture than we think. Way more.
So as you can see from everything Peterson just said, the reason he says the far left have co-opted language is because they have. Most of the people in the humanities, and as he said, the humanities are closest to our culture, therefore they're closest to our language, are far left radicals. That's why he says the far left have co-opted language. They're taking control of our language from the level of the humanities and philosophy. And I agree with him that this is a very bad thing.
They're left bitter and resentful and without purpose and adrift and hostile and resentful and vengeful and arrogant and deceitful and of no use to themselves and of no use to anyone else, and no partner for a woman, and there's nothing in it that's good.
So that clip that you just saw is from the Channel 4 interview that Peterson did with Kathy Newman. There's about a 5-minute clip where he talks about how a whole generation of young boys don't know how to be men. But not once in that 5 minutes does he even mention feminism or blame them. Now, I'm not going to play you the whole 5-minute clip, but it will be linked in the description below should you want to check it out. But I will play for you about the first 2 minutes of it, and I believe that would be satisfactory enough to show you that he's not blaming feminism for why young men are like this.
Jordan Peterson, you've said that men need to, quote, grow the hell up. Tell me why.
Well, because there's nothing uglier than an old infant. There's nothing good about it. People who don't grow up don't find the sort of meaning in their life that sustains them through difficult times, and they're certain to encounter difficult times. And they're left bitter and resentful and without purpose and adrift and hostile and resentful and vengeful and arrogant and deceitful and of no use to themselves and of no use to anyone else, and no partner for a woman, and there's nothing in it that's good.
So you say, I mean, that sounds pretty bad. You're saying
It's
there's a
bad.
crisis of masculinity. I mean, what do you do about it?
You help people understand why it's necessary and important for them to grow up and adopt responsibility. Why that isn't a shake your finger and get your act together sort of thing. Why it's more like a delineation of the kind of destiny that makes life worth living. I've been telling young men, but it's not, I wasn't specifically aiming this message at young men to begin with. It just kind of turned out that way.
And it's mostly, you admit, it's mostly men listening. I mean,
it
90% of your audiences are men,
Well, it's
right?
about 80% on YouTube, YouTube is a male domain primarily. So it's hard to tell how much of it is because YouTube is male and how much of it is because of what I'm saying. But what I've been telling young men is that there's an actual reason why they need to grow up, which is that they have something to offer, you know, that people have within them this capacity to set the world straight, and that's necessary to manifest in the world. And that also doing so is where you find the meaning that sustains you in life.
So what's gone wrong then?
Oh God, all sorts of things have gone wrong. I don't think that young men hear words of encouragement, some of them never in their entire lives, as far as I can tell.
And again, Peterson can't choose his followers.
Even if you didn't mean it to, it attracts people like neo-Nazis and fascists because they see an avenue in what you're saying. They see an avenue in that to continue to spread their hateful ideology and to make more people hateful. So that's why the Nazis come here.
And how is that in any way Jordan Peterson's fault? If neo-Nazis find what he's saying as an avenue to their platform, that's not Jordan Peterson's fault, and the blame should not lay with him.
Trans people were physically assaulted at this rally in your name. Would you like to disavow that violence?
Yes.
Disavowing violence. Wow, BRUT, he really is a piece of shit.
So you wish that didn't happen, and you want to...
And he wishes it didn't happen. What a total piece of shit.
I've studied Nazism for a very long time, and I understand it very well. And I can tell you that there's some awful people lurking in the corners, and they're ready to come out. And if the radical left keeps pushing the way
That sounds very much like a
they're
threat.
going to come.
If you were to describe who Jordan Peterson is, you would describe him as somebody who believes in equality of opportunity, that he finds racism towards anybody to be abhorrent, and that in fact he draws people away from the alt-right and is not really a hero of them at all. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you later. See ya.